Hey, Greg here. Did you know that I've created a few walking tours of Bangkok? Using the GPS on your phone, the routes take you through some of my favorite areas of the city, exploring the fascinating neighborhoods and hidden history that give Bangkok its sweet, sweet mojo. Head to voicemap.me and search for Bangkok. On this episode, we talk to counselor Amy Pothong about the state of the mental health profession in Thailand.
So if you're wondering why this important field is seldom discussed and little understood in Thai culture, you'll learn a lot on this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 to study the ways of the samurai, but got confused and ended up living with three guys named Urai. And I will hold for applause on that terrible play on words.
That's bad. That's bad. And I am Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 24 years ago, fell in love with Thai people nodding very knowingly when I say something very cynical about politics, so I never left.
That's funny, right? Like you almost don't want to push it any further. Like, okay, we get each other, but I don't know where their red line is, so...
You know, I'll tell you something that never happens.
What?
You say something really cynical about politics. Thai people never say like, "Wait, what? Well, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about?" It's not like it's not like that. They're like, "Yeah, like we get it."
Or maybe they're like, "I don't want to get this dummy foreigner to open his mouth and say something stupid that'll implicate me."
Maybe that very well could be. All right, we want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get every episode a day early, behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, a heads up to send questions to upcoming guests, and access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. On this week's bonus show, we chatted about the shockingly low level of knowledge that a lot of young people seem to have when it comes to understanding technology rather than simply using it. More discussions about the coming onslaught of AI and how it will replace us all eventually. And a story about a recent bike ride up to Gok Krat that saw Greg wipe out on a wet road. A solid reminder that he's not 30 anymore.
No doubt.
To learn how to become a patron and get all this good stuff, plus full access to over 700 bonus and regular back episodes, click the support button at the top of our website.
Totes my goats. Don't forget, if you listen to us on Spotify, you can now hear all of the bonus shows there as well. If you're a patron, simply link your Patreon account to your Spotify account and add our new feed titled Bangkok Podcast Badass Patrons Only to hear the regular and bonus shows in the same place. Alrighty then, well, in this episode, we are happy to have on the show someone who can speak to something that we've wanted to talk about for a long time, which is mental health, which is still a relatively new and little understood and infrequently discussed topic in Thailand. Now, to be honest, we've had a hard time finding someone to chat about all this, which kind of fits with one of the themes of the show. The last time we talked about mental health was on episode 79 of season 3, so we're well overdue for a sequel. So on this episode, we chat with Amy Pothong, who founded Golden Leaf Counseling in Phuket, where she joined us from tonight. She has a Master of Science degree in Clinical Community Counseling from the Johns Hopkins University, is a licensed professional counselor in Wyoming and Arizona, and has been working in the field of counseling and clinical psychology for nearly 2 decades. So to discuss this very interesting but little understood area in Thailand, here is my conversation with Amy Pothong. Well, we are psyched to welcome to the show a first-time guest, and maybe only first of many-time guests, who knows, but we are welcoming a licensed therapist to talk about something that is very, very important that we maybe don't focus on too much here at the Bangkok Podcast, but we should focus on more, and I'm talking to Amy Pothong. Amy, welcome to the Bangkok Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate talking to you and you giving up your time to come on the show. You are talking to me from Phuket, and I'm in Bangkok. So that is where you live and practice. Is that right?
Yes. I have a private practice here on the side, and I work at an international school here as a school counselor.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. I was just in Phuket about a month ago, actually, on a staff trip, but I was not near any international schools because I'm done with that part of my life. So our paths have not yet crossed, but maybe one day in the future.
I think you just missed the rain. I think for the past weeks has been raining here. So I'm glad that a month ago maybe you caught some good weather here in Phuket.
Yeah, actually, we were there like the 3 days it didn't rain of the entire month, so it was a really really lucky trip. Yeah.
Good.
Well, like I said, we're going to talk about mental health this episode, and we'll get into that in a second here. But it's something that we've done a few episodes on this before, because
Hmm.
to set the stage, mental health is something that's very, very common in the West. Everyone's got a shrink. My therapist said this. I was sitting at my therapist the other day, and it's very normalized. But in Eastern cultures and Asian cultures and in Thailand, it's not really normalized yet. It's not something that people talk about openly, and it's not very common from my perspective, as far as I understand it. And I think maybe that it should be, because everyone needs to talk to someone every once in a while. I have my wife, even though she doesn't like it, but anyway, she's my counselor. So first
Yeah.
of all, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself? Like, who are you? Where did you come from? And how did you go into this field? And what gives you the drive to continue working at it?
Yes, absolutely. I am a Thai, and I guess in a way that third culture kid of being a Thai American comes to mind when it comes to me. I was born in the province of Udon Thani here in Thailand, where my dad was a ตำรวจ ทางหลวง, so a highway patrol, and my mom was a school teacher. And by the time I was 2, they divorced, and my mom happened to get this great work opportunity in Maryland. So at that moment, there's a huge stigma, and I remember this clearly because I have an older sister where a Thai woman left her policeman husband. So I was bounced around a lot, but I would say I spend most of my time not in Udon, but in Pidgeot, which is the middle of the country type of province. And it's not really, you can't really go past it, right? You have to meant to go there in order to visit the land of the Chalawan, right? The crocodile king there. That's the tale
Right.
of that city. And then when I was around 9, my father passed away. So the whirlwind of stuff happening where I was feeling pretty secure living in Pidgeot with my grandparents, my aunt and uncle, which is a great example of a multi-generational family structure that's really common in the Thai culture. I grew up around it.
Hmm.
And my mom had to come in and swoop this up. And by that time, she was already working towards our visa. And then he passed in January. And by October, I was on my way to start my life in the US as a
Wow.
10-year-old. I went to a public school, graduated with probably 100 kids in my class, right? Just huge high school. And then I continue on my education at Towson University, where I got my bachelor's, and then Johns Hopkins, where I received my master's in clinical counseling. And then continue on to Arizona State, and that's kind of how I made my way from the East Coast to the West Coast of the country, because I got into a doctorate program there. But then I met a boy and I dropped out, or that's the version I like to tell people.
There it is. You met a girl, met a boy. Just
Yeah,
throws a monkey in the wrench every time, doesn't it?
right, absolutely. So I interned at the International Rescue Committee, the IRC in Phoenix, for a couple months.
Okay.
And then I moved on to Head Start. And Head Start is a program for low-income families that they can access early childhood education from birth to 5. And I was a counselor over there for a school district in Phoenix, Arizona, taking care of kiddos from about 4 schools within that district.
Hmm.
And I think that's when I fell in love with the idea of the helping profession and teaching and counseling all together.
And how did you end up in Thailand? Was it another boy or the same boy?
Same boy. If he's listening to this, I think I don't want to give away all my secrets, but definitely same boy. and we started our international journey together, 2013.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk briefly about mental health in Thailand. Then, can you give us sort of some insight into why it's not discussed openly here, or what specifically about Thai culture makes it less known or unpopular or a difficult nut to crack here? Like, what's the mental health landscape in Thailand like?
That's a big question, and I can definitely share from just my own personal perspective of growing up in Thailand. Maintaining my Thai was a big part of my mom's school, so I was actually sent back here every summer since I was 10 to go to a Wat school, so Wat Khao Lup Chang in Pijit, to study Thai with my uncle, who was a principal there.
Wow.
Okay, so the general landscape, to me as a person who was born and raised with some of these values. Remember, I grew up with my grandparents, and I remember going to the temple with them on one prat. Like there are many opportunities, many days to make merits, and the words that I remember from that was things like tambun, or khopon, or takbat, or making sure that you make your merit. So I do think the general landscape around this is shaped by a lot of cultural legacies within Thailand, and we can break them down into a lot of units. But generally speaking, I think Buddhism has shaped a large part of the mental health landscape in Thailand. And we can talk about the good and the bad parts of that, just like any culture, I think. Number two, there's a bunch of inter and multi-generational stuff that pops up within the cultures of Thailand. So whether if it's multi-generational household, whether if it's filial responsibilities or piety, I would say conflict avoidance. And I'm going to refer to the book called The Culture Map by, I believe her name is Erin Meyer, as well as Malcolm Gladwell book Outliers, because both authors has these two interesting concepts. One talks about high context versus low context culture, which I think has a huge part in how the mental health landscape is shaped. And then Gladwell mentioned speaker oriented versus listener oriented culture, which goes within the same spectrum of context within the culture. All of that, I say, have an input on how we view mental health in Thailand.
That's interesting. And that sort of brought a question to my mind. I mean, Thailand is well known for having a very strong family culture, and it's focused on family. Whereas in the West, like we kick our kids out as soon as they turn 18, get a job, So does that sort of take the place of sort of a mental health bed, I guess you could say, like sort of a cushion around you, like that strong family dynamic where you always have someone around you to bounce ideas off of, versus in the West where we're sort of much more independent and even determined to be away from our family situations?
I think it's definitely more complicated for us to put into words. But what I can say is that it's a catch-22. Having that strong family ties where you are quite close. There's multi-generational families. The grandparents help raise the grandchildren. There's a huge support system, and I can see how that could really build resilience in individuals. On the other hand, how much of that is you looking out for the good or the betterment of your family and then foregoing your individuality? And then that in itself turns into conflict avoidance, turn into potential suppressions of individual needs. And it can turn into guilt and shame if concepts like gatanyu or bun kun, if those terms come into play, I feel like it can really cause guilt and shame and a huge battle between should you continue with your career path, or should you come back home and feel your responsibilities?
Right. So a bit of a double-edged sword can be sort of, like it can
Absolutely.
be comforting, but it can also be like the sort of Damocles hanging over your head. Yeah.
And same thing in the West, just how much of it is too much individuality that you kind of forego the goodness of the families that you have, and being able to visit and enjoy more than just the holidays, for example. Or if you're starting your own core family, what does that look like for you? And if your kids continue to repeat the patterns, what is that like for you? And we haven't even gotten started on the elderly care, and how much our system here is just not set up for that. Therefore, being responsible, or เลี้ยงดูพ่อแม่ตอนแก่เฒ่า it becomes such a big concept.
Right.
For adults aged 24 to 50 who will have that responsibility.
Right. I somewhat cynically think that there's a huge growth opportunity here for old folks' homes like we have in the West, because I think as a lot of Thais, Western educated and maybe influenced more by Western culture, are coming back to Thailand, I think they're not going to, that traditional structure of, my parents will just live with me. I think that's kind of going the way of the dodo, and there's going to be maybe a need for places to safely put your parents where they can be taken care of. So I may be like really onto something, or I may just be being a cynical knob about it. I don't know, but it seems that it's part of the whole dynamic of family relationships and mental health and guilt that's slowly evolving and changing.
Yeah, no, I think that there is something to that, and I think it's just gonna maybe take some time, like every big thing, coming into a very strong cultural values where it could be viewed as a form of neglect. So I think that is a solution. A lot of my clients who came in with to see me about being in the middle of these responsibilities, part of it is I can hire help, but there's a lack of trust in the higher help that comes in.
And the parent might be like, why are you hiring a stranger to take care of me instead of doing it yourself, you ungrateful wretch?
Absolutely. And there's a saying that goes in with that. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. You might have. It's quite common. It's รักวัวให้ผูกรักลูกให้ตี right? So there's a lot of the message that there's a lot of parent sacrifice, and it becomes almost like this potential trauma-based upbringing, or entering the cycle of the 3 A's, which I remember my clinical supervisor was sharing with me back in the day that I was getting my licensure, which is addiction, adultery, and abuse. So I feel like without addressing it properly, we're just going to repeat into these cycles of not knowing what to do, and entering this guilt and shame cycle without any solution, and then potentially hit those 3 big A's.
Wow.
That becomes like a part of our lives, and that we take with us,
Vicious circle. Yeah, with no solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of a Thai workplace too, and I think it's something that, us loudmouth foreigners complain about a lot, is that everyone always dances around the issue or the bottleneck or the problem, and nothing ever gets solved because it's very conflict averse, So it's sort of like this frustrating roadblock where everyone knows what the problem is, but no one actually really wants to do anything about it.
And in a way, maybe that works. Maybe it works for that workplace culture. World Mental Health Day is coming up, and on October 10th, and the theme is actually prioritizing mental health care in the workplace. So I'll be curious to see what kind of campaign is starting up to celebrate that day. And part of that workplace too, and I can bring this into now, is the low context versus high context culture. I think Thailand and Japan were both high context, but how it plays out is quite different. Sorry, I mentioned Japan because I lived there for about 3 years, and I worked there in Osaka for about 3 years before my move to Phuket.
Okay.
And Aaron Meyer on the culture map just mentioned how those interactions can come out very differently. So the workplace that you mentioned, if you're not on the same level of am I talking to you in a high context, or are you answering me from a low context because of your cultural legacy that you bring with you? Then there's bound to be a certain levels of misunderstanding and frustration that goes across, right? And if I think about my Thai brain, which it's magical how it can be switched. And it's really hard for me in my brain. It feels like inside out, but a more involved version of that, of the different emotions controlling my brain. And when I think about my Thai side, I'm like, this is an amazing culture. It's a rich tapestry full of respect and kindness. And if we're able to dig deep into it, I wonder what we can find. I think Aaron Meyer also mentioned a peach versus a coconut culture.
Okay.
Which is interesting. So it's like hard shell, one like Americans, for example, or coconut culture, where it's kind of hard shell. Once you break in, you pretty much know everything, will become your bestest friend once you break our hard shell. And then a peach culture would be like maybe a Thai culture where you kind of soft, it's a land of smile. You get these greetings. People are generally nice to you. But then it's hard to get to that hard pit, and once you get in, maybe you can't even crack it open, right?
Oh, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Good analogy. So let's talk about the industry in Thailand and the mental health industry you've got. I mean, there's probably nuanced differences between, a therapist and a counselor and a psychologist and a psychiatrist and a shrink and a headman or whatever you want to call it. So how is that industry doing? Is it growing? Is it becoming more acceptable? Is it changing? Is it adapting? Is it still sort of on the outside looking in? How do things look from your perspective as a professional?
So my perspective as a professional, if we were to look into an international school community, there's bound to be at least 2 counselors that are just split between college advising and social emotional for each international school. And maybe you can justify it based on the fees or whatever you're paying. You have the student support service. As a private clinician, I think that there is growth in this area, but not really from the local Thais. I see a couple of practices popping up from Thai psychologists who potentially have credentials from overseas or who finish psychiatry and able to prescribe meds here. I think there's a lot more resources in Bangkok than it is locally here in Phuket. And I lived in Chiang Mai for 7 years before my move to Japan. And I know that back then it was quite limited. And when you're talking about therapists, and this is just my personal bias, and maybe because I come from a place where there's a 3,000 hours requirements for me to become licensed.
Wow.
Longer than, a police academy where you get to hold a weapon. But that's not for this show. And I needed 100 hours plus supervision, clinical supervision hours. I need to take 2 licensing exams. I have to be nationally accredited as well as per state licensure so I can practice within that state. And if I were to move for another state, I have to go through a reciprocity process, retake ethics and law, etc. per that state. So that to say I am biased within knowing really well about the US credentialing process. And I'm now just learning about other countries' credentialing process. For example, UK therapists coming in with different qualifications, or therapists from Australia, or a hypnotist who there's a licensing board in the UK, for that. And it's, I come from an ignorant place with those concepts, and there are life coaches. So there's a lot of supporting staff around. But when people do ask me if I can refer them to someone, the best place I can do is Google, because it's quite a slippery slope. If you were to refer someone to that I really don't know and I don't vet out their service, it's a little tough because I know my credentials, but I don't really know theirs. So I think it's better for people to kind of find out and do a test session for free and figure out the fit on their own.
You're talking about specifically in Thailand.
Yes, right now, in terms of the trends, I think that there's a lot of, because it's so international, not every licensed therapist is based from the US.
So do you see a difference then between the issues that the expat community would face here and the Thai community would face here?
I would say some differences, some similarities. And, if I can imagine this question my answers being structured like a Venn diagram. I think that's exactly how I would look at it. There's some similarities of some things in the middle. And I would say the 3 A's, addiction, abuse, and adultery. Those are some things that I feel like there's some commonality there.
Okay. Right.
And then there's a split between like filial responsibility. That's very Thai. That comes into it a lot. Childhood trauma, that comes in a lot. And I'm not sure if in this case, if less is more is the operational word that people are looking for, like the less we know, the more we know in this case, because the more you know, the more people are educating themselves on podcasts or listening to parenting styles. And now that they become parents themselves, there's often a reflection about, wait a minute, my childhood was totally different. So I see some childhood trauma, childhood questions coming up, and then kind of finding a balance between how to be individuals and taking care of your core family unit and meeting the filial responsibility expectations. That would be the Thai side.
Right.
The expat side, you see a little bit of a relationship navigation. You see a little bit of a work-life balance. Remember, this is in addition to the blending in the middle of the 3 A's. So I think that there's variations of those coming through.
Very interesting. I just the other day, I happened to across this article on CNN Health, and I knew that we were going to be talking, so I pulled it up here. And this is very America-centric, but I'm not sure if it speaks to a larger trend globally. Probably not, but I found it interesting. It said, employment growth for the mental health field for psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, counselors, psychiatric aides, and social workers is expected to triple to projection for the typical U.S. job, according to an analysis of new data. A subset of mental health practitioners, specifically mental health counselors, which include substance abuse and behavioral disorder counselors, is projected to grow even more rapidly, 19% going from about 450,000 workers to 534 by 2033. Wow. It says two factors could be increasing demand for mental health services, decreasing stigma around seeking treatment, and increasing uncertainty in people's lives. She told CNN the political divisiveness, economic uncertainty, gun violence, and the climate crisis are factors putting particular pressures on Americans. I'm not sure how much of that applies to Thailand, but it seems that it's certainly a growing trend in America and probably a lot of Western countries as well.
Yeah, and I think just for me being a practitioner around here, I definitely see that. And like I said, the credentials of therapists are coming from a different place, and I'm coming from a place of ignorance where I can't really speak to other countries' qualifications. I can see definitely the two that clicked in is increasing uncertainties and then the stigma behind what's going on. I don't know if Thailand has less stigma behind it. There's still this word like โรงพยาบาลบ้า or เป็นคนบ้าไปแล้ว. There's still that general phrase around being crazy, quote unquote, if you do seek mental health treatment. And
โรงพยาบาลบ้า, and not, like that. Is that what they're called?
Absolutely. Like, that's exactly the layman terms for places like Sitanya or it's labeled สวนปรุง. That's the one in Chiang Mai that's really popular. It's if you hear สวนปรุง, that's โรงพยาบาลบ้า. It's labeled as such.
Okay, and for those that don't speak Thai, โรงพยาบาลบ้าmeans crazy hospital, literally.
And it's so there's still a lot of stigma behind that, and a lot of Thai clients that I do get, I have to say they have been privileged enough or have the opportunity to go abroad. And when they come back, I think that naturally just opens up their experience to something new and bringing that back with them to kind of shape who they are. Part of the stigma, I believe, just comes from the culture of keeping things in the family, right? So the idea of
right.
อย่าทำให้ครอบครัวเสียหน้า or that like saving face, or we can deal with it within, don't cause a scene. I feel like those are some elements creating a stigma around causing any problems.
Right. Don't rock the boat kind of thing. So as we're wrapping up here, do you see things changing for the better here? Like, is this slowly becoming more accepted and more commonly talked about? And, going to see someone for mental health, is it becoming less stigmatized? Do you think it will be over time? How do things look for the future?
I definitely think so. I think that what I'm seeing is people are realizing that everyone has mental health. I see that being along the same line as everybody has health. Everybody has mental health. And I think people are trying to figure out how to take care of their mental health through the wonderful integration of Western and Thai cultures. I was observing a group of ladies wearing white going to the temple, a local temple here in Phuket, and they were there and they were going to meditate, right? Like nang samadhi. And when I just kind of caught up with them, I call everybody meh because they're just older ladies, and I think I just have a little bit of that connection, and I was like catching up with them, and they're like, yeah, we're too old, and sometimes we have nothing left in our mind, and coming to this just kind of helps center our thoughts, and I was like, okay, that's an amazing way to kind of put actions and Buddhist practice with mindfulness, number one. So I see a lot of navigation with what they know, they'll talk to a friend, or at times they're seeking out professional help. And I see that as definitely being a positive trend towards taking care of mental health. But I think this is my love for my culture in both US and Thai, is that I think people are just finding their way to integrate it without going fully one way or the other. So I do see a little bit of, Western research on the impact of Googling on some of the disorders you might find, and then finding a yoga class to go to, or going to a silent retreat, or whatever that is that people kind of hold on to. So I say it's going up, and I'm really happy about it. There's this organization called Safe Space Phuket. The owner of that is, her name is Mila Bundia. She was a professor at Prince Songkla here in Phuket, and she quit that to run it. And I remember volunteering when they were, when they had an office. Now they're fully remote. Just volunteering once a month, doing free counseling and bringing all the profit back to Safe Space Phuket. And when mental health is made available to people do take advantage of it. And that's one thing, and I'm going to leave with this, but it seems like a big note to leave on, is that mental health here is still quite luxurious. There's not enough work insurance or Prakan Sangkom, like the national insurance that covers mental health.
Right.
So, and my service is an example of something that is quite a luxury to do. So when I give back and do that volunteering once a month, and I see clients for about 3 to 4 hours, and I see them at half an hour each, there's a lot of different types of people that came through. And whatever they pay, I'll leave that with Safe Space. So it's usually 100 to 500 if they can do it. And you get a mix of expats and locals doing those. So making mental health accessible, I think that's going to be one of the main challenge of Thailand. Because right now it still feels like it's it's luxurious. You have to kind of be able to introspect, and who the heck know how to introspect, unless you grew up with it. I don't think you know how to introspect as a Thai person. I don't think you get that when you're growing up. Like, how does that make you feel, or what do you think about this? So I think
Right.
the biggest challenge is to kind of make it affordable.
Yeah, interesting. It's very close to my heart too, because a very good friend of mine earlier this year committed suicide, and this person was someone
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
you would never in a million years ever guess it would come to that, because they had everything you could ask for, everything you would want and more. And it was such a shock, because it just sort of really drove home, like, wow, everyone's got their thing, everyone's dealing with their thing, and it's not apparent and it's not obvious, and you just never know. So making it accessible and easy and removing the stigma would probably help a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely. And that's probably a big battle to fight, but I take my small wins, with
Right.
my responsibility, paying off my student loan still from Johns Hopkins. I'm still paying that off. This is not something that can just go away with the U.S. education system. But again, that's not for this podcast. And taking my small wins, making donations when there's a flooding over here on Gata Beach, or doing volunteering for free counseling, or doing pro bono work. I have to take that small win and fill my heart with it, because at least I'm playing a part. And I wouldn't be playing a good guest tonight if I don't share some resources. So the two main resources for just mental health care that I'm aware of, that I've recommended and use and call for myself to vet them out, it's 1323, which is the Thailand hotline. It's available in Thai and English, and of course Samaritans of Thailand. So if you Google those, you should be able to see the numbers that popped up for Samaritans of Thailand, and they'll be able to provide good resources for you if you need immediate support. 1323 and Samaritans of Thailand.
Fantastic advice. Great thing to end on. Yeah. Well, Amy Pothong, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's a very interesting topic, and I'm glad people like you are doing good work and working to make it more more accessible and less stigmatized, which is what we need.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Okay. Well, I hope to have you back sometime, and we'll get some high context, low context discussions going on, or some other aspect. I'm sure there's a million different facets of this we could dive into. So let's chat later.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm glad we did another episode on this. This topic is, I don't know what the right word is. I don't want to say near and dear to my heart as if it's something good, but dealing with young Thai people at the university level, I really get the feeling that there's a lot of things going on underneath the surface that never comes out with young Thai people because of Thai culture and because of this pressure to always be smiling and to always say "mai pen rai." There's some advantages to that. We've talked about how we love how nice Thai people are and how they're not confrontational. But man, spending as many hours as I do with young Thai people, they have as many issues as any other young people in the world, except culturally or socially, they're not taught how to talk about their problems.
Right, exactly. And that's what Amy said, like this sort of these cycles that you can't escape from, because you want to talk about someone, but you're discouraged from talking about this to someone, just keep it inside. And then you've got the family pressures and social pressures. So it's definitely something that I think is good, that it's starting to become more understood and more easily discussed here. But something that I think was really interesting that we chatted briefly about, when we talked about more and more Thais being educated overseas, where it's very common to talk about seeing your shrink. It's like a lunch topic you have with friends, and then bringing that familiarity back to Thailand, and so it's good to see that it's slowly changing. And of course, I also brought up, the very sad story of a friend that you and I both know, where earlier this year committed suicide, and it was someone that in a million years we never would have guessed would do that. So it's a very good example that everyone has got their thing and everyone's dealing with their demons, and it might not be
Oh, it certainly can
anybody.
affect anyone, and
Yeah.
I think it's just every country is unique, every culture is unique, and so psychology is just not going to be the same everywhere. You might have like some universal principles that apply to human beings, but then the way it gets processed through local culture is going to be different. And I just think traditionally for Thai people, they just hold stuff in, and they don't get professional help. And I have a couple success stories or heartwarming stories from my students. Occasionally, I get students who come to me with issues or problems that are really kind of mental health issues, and I always, now that I've dealt with it a few times, I have an approach to these things where I always tell my students that they can come talk to me anytime they want. So I want to let them know that
Right.
I'm kind of here. I'm here for them, but I also make very clear to them that I'm not a trained counselor and I'm not a mental health professional, and I always make clear to them that that's what they need. Like, so it's good to have someone to talk to. That's good,
Right.
but I want them to see mental health like physical health, and so when you have a problem with physical health, you see a trained doctor.
Right. You don't go talk to your professor. Hey, my knee hurts. What should I do?
Emotional and personal stuff, it is a little bit different. And of course, you might talk to your friends or your mom, and it's great. It's great to get emotional support and comfort. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But that's not for real mental health issues. That's not treatment.
That's right.
Yeah,
a
that's
good
not the
point.
same. That's not the same thing.
Well, I'll tell you, when I do something stupid at home, my wife doesn't hold anything back. So she's very mentally healthy, I would guess. It's not, but anyway, thank you, Amy, for coming on and talking. That was really interesting. And she also mentioned a lot of, high context, low context stuff, which maybe we'll do a sequel to, because I know you know more about that
man.
than I do, Ed. But I'm really interested in learning about that.
That whole thing changed my life. That framework really changed my life.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that another time. But anyway, thanks, Amy. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you for coming on the show, and we will hopefully talk to you soon.
For sure. Thank you, Amy.
All right, let's do something we call Would You Rather, where one of us picks two contrasting situations tied to Thailand to debate and choose which one we'd prefer. Ed, it's over to you this week. What do you got?
All right, Mr. Craig, I've got a kind of old school, maybe classic question, pretty basic, straightforward kind of thing.
All right.
I don't know why I thought of this. I think I thought of it because I recently stumbled across I have all these papers stacked up in my office, and it was like an old writing assignment. It was just a simple essay writing thing, and I had my students write essay on what did they prefer, pizza or pad thai? It was kind of like how to write an argumentative essay, 3 reasons why pad thai is better than pizza kind of thing. But I think pizza, pad thai, that's a little bit too basic. That's not Greg-centric enough.
Not only do I not like pad thai, pizza is probably my all-time favorite. So that would be an
So I'm
easy
not.
one.
Yeah, that's too easy. So here's my option. So you're really hungry, and you've got a choice between 2 meals. Just a classic, old school, red-blooded Canadian American hamburger, or a really big dish of lab mu. I know you're a lob guy. You're a lob guy.
You bastard. You went with my favorite. It would be an easy choice if it was pad thai.
I'm actually a fan of pad thai. I know that's kind of the cheesy foreigner thing, but I actually let me think about this. I actually had pad thai for lunch today, as a matter of fact.
Oh, really? You mean the fake dish created by
That's
a
right.
dictator?
By the fascist. It's a fascist meal.
Enjoy your fascist noodles.
I feel like you got to go burger, but I know you love lob as well.
Man, yeah, I got to go burger. But man, a good plate of lab mu with some sticky rice.
You can take the guy
Man,
out of
that's
you can
really
take
good
the
too,
guy
but
out of Calgary, but you can't take Calgary
Exactly.
out of the guy.
I got to go with a hamburger just for like cultural momentum and attachment and nostalgia, stomach nostalgia.
So funny.
Yeah,
It's
it's close.
it's weird because I just love Thai food, But if I just need comfort food, it's pizza. It's like I just grew up with it. It's just, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's American. Even though I know it's originally Italian or some version of it. We Americanized it. It's just when you have 30 years of something before I even started eating Thai food, it's like you can't undo. You can't undo that.
What's harder, quitting smoking or quitting pizza? Why can't I quit you? Yeah, that's a good one. But yeah, pizza or hamburger by an edge.
All right,
but
I like it.
But after that, I'll go back and have some lamu for dessert.
Why not both? That's Greg's answer.
That's right. Meat for the main course and meat for dessert.
All right. A final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping in our never-ending quest for cool content. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Totally. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can send us a voicemail through our website that will feature on the show. Find me on Threads at BKKGreg. Thank you for listening, everyone. Stay dry over the next couple of weeks, and we'll see you back here next week.
For sure.
I want to buy some green apples before a podcast because I read an interview with a very famous voiceover actor named Don LaFontaine years and years ago. And he said to properly release the tension in your vocal cords, you need pectin.
Oh.
And what has pectin is green apples and jam.
I love Fuji apples, dude. I'm a big Fuji apple guy. They're green. Wait, is that the one that's green? No,
that's Granny Smith are green.
Granny Smith are green, yeah. Fuji are kind of like reddish,
right?
Not bright red.
Now I'm craving an apple. Might have one after we're done. How's that? All right.